She didn't believe in the meaning of forever. Death Name is a Tubi original where a young Korean-American girl named Sophie Park, played by Amy Kyum, decides to leave her family's home in Georgia to pursue a new life at a new college, meet new people, and also dive into the lineage of her family history because her grandmother has been very tight-lipped about all the goings-on in Korea, so much so that she emigrated to the U.S., Georgia specifically, and doesn't even want anybody to actually speak Korean. Doesn't even want to have Sophie know that she has a Korean name for a few particular reasons. One, there's a dark secret in this family lineage that could unearth so much that Sophie could not possibly be prepared for. So, I want to talk about what I liked about this movie before I dive into anything else. I like the theme of what Koreans have gone through just to get to the U.S., older generations trying to give the next generation a better life, so on and so forth. That's really what you're supposed to do regardless of what country you came from or what country you're in. Just do your best to give the new generations the best life possible. But the grandmother is very, very tight-lipped. Also is suffering from dementia and a few other things, and really doesn't want Sophie to go poking her nose around and putting her fingers anywhere that they don't belong. That's right, kids. Always make sure you don't put your fingers in any particular place because you don't know where those places have been or where your fingers are going to. Moving on from fingering, let's talk about this particular movie. So, it does show, some stock footage about, the Korean conflict and everything. And there are mentions of Japan's rule over Korea and stuff like that, and also the theme of a particular way of life ending that is kind of frowned upon in Korean cultures. Actually, I believe in Japanese cultures and other cultures as well in that part of the world. And this is also themed around something that the grandma absolutely knows about. It's pretty obvious, and it's also an 81-minute movie with end credits. And while there is a noble effort to have a unique spin and add a little more drama to a typical ghost story, this also ends up being a film that is so standard, stock, bland, and while it features people that try, doesn't really have anything new to say. It's like a version of The Grudge, if The Grudge was basically made on a shoestring budget. Not that I expected much from the special effects. And obviously this is not a super low budget movie. It's well shot in some parts, but it's obviously a low budget effort. I did like the black and white opening, and it does tie into something that actually is very fucking obvious once they introduce one particular character. Acting isn't awful. It's not necessarily a great movie. It's rather bland and boring, and sometimes that's worse than just being flat out bad. I'm going to get into spoilers on Tubi. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. That's right. Quick spoiler section here. I did like the character of Ari, played by Alice Bang. Stop laughing. This is a serious discussion. And after the black and white stock footage stuff about Eisenhower's vow and all that and everything, we see a black and white opening with somebody in a weird hat, and also a girl in a closet, and a woman that ends up taking her own life, David Carradine style, just not in a Bangkok closet. Yeah, I have a closet full of jokes about that too. But there's pearls on the ground, and yeah, pearls on the ground, man, looking like a fool with your pearls on the ground. The guy sells it, opens up the closet, and then boom, we go to opening credits. Old and somewhat current, montages of generations growing up. Because this is obviously back in, the 20s or something like that, 20s, 30s, whatever it is. And we see Sophie winding up on campus. She isn't able to get into a lot of the classes she wants, so it's like 20th century, East Asian studies. And she didn't learn Korean. Why didn't she have a Korean name? The grandmother is fearful and angry to the point she is slapping her own granddaughter. It's supposed to be because of dementia. No, she's just kind of rude. Really trying to put her off of this stuff by saying, "I will slap you to pieces." It's known as the Fritz von Erich method. And there are 3 other Korean people that are in her school. Literally to the point that the other girl, Ari, is her roommate. And she has a boyfriend, but don't worry, Sophie will soon have a boyfriend. There's also a weird leak in the ceiling. What is it with me seeing movies with leaks in the ceiling in the past year? There was If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, and a few others It's actually kind of impressive. Beau Was Afraid had, a goddamn weird thing from the ceiling. We had that Marty Supreme. So, after learning her Korean name that is told to her, which is Park Hyun. Sorry for screwing that up. I do deeply apologize. She ends up sharing some drinks and the Never Have I Ever stuff with the 3 other Korean people that are in this movie, students. I did note Alice is very beautiful. Nothing against, Amy at all. I'm just saying I liked how tall Alice was. Moving on from that, I will just also say that I like that they were trying to introduce these characters and get us to know them a little bit. We did have a guy named Kwan who ended up, he basically liked Sophie, but that wasn't going to work out. And they're in Georgia. Why the hell not? This is a second straight movie I've seen based out of Georgia. The other one was Toxicity. This is a much better movie as far as production and acting and just overall feel. It's not great. It's boring, but it is leagues better than that. And the grandmother, not necessarily doing all that well. She was the girl from the opening that was hiding in the closet. She was pregnant with the mother. And it turns out that this person that Sophie ends up meeting, a guy named June, he is actually, and he's a displaced spirit, shall we say. It's a romance, it's a whirlwind romance, but it's obvious that it's not going to, last before eventually being revealed. Kevin Wu, by the way, who was Mystery Saja from K-Pop Demon Hunters, doing original songs for that. Seriously, look up his IMDb page. And I did like one neat little shot before she actually ended up, getting to know June, of like she gets in this van and there's this shadow there. That was actually kind of cool. There are elements of this I don't mind. But then there is talk about this King Go Young, or Ko Young, whatever it is, he kickstarted the industrial age in Korea, but after Japan doing what they did, kind of erased him from the records. And because the great-grandmother took her life, that's frowned upon, so her name was kind of, pushed away, and that ended up actually with the grandmother and the mother basically leaving, and things weren't going to go all that well unless they did leave. Ari basically thinks that Sophie is an insult to her culture. Ari also doesn't realize how hard Sophie's family did have to fight to give her a better life. And the leak in the ceiling is getting worse. It's an allegory for something a little bit later on. Things are good with June at first. He talked about his ex not believing in the meaning of forever. And he also, his family has ties to the electrical work in Korea going back to the birth of the electrical age. That's oddly specific. He hands her a gift. The gift was actually berries, but she saw them as pearls. The pearls that fell on the ground from there. And, he apologizes to Sophie, gets her to say her name, so now he has dominion over her. Not New Japan Pro Wrestling Dominion in Osaka, but nevertheless. So, they end up sleeping together and doing the big old nasty, as it were. And the face suddenly appears out of the opening of the ceiling. Or opening in the ceiling. Gee, I wonder what that's going to end up being an allegory for. Pregnancy, by the way, just in case you didn't get that. And she steps on some broken glass everywhere, and then she does some karaoke. This leads to a montage and drinking that goes on way longer than it needs to. She ends up accidentally hitting Kwan, not meaning to. Ow, my eyes, I'm not supposed to get bullshit cliches in them. And the grandmother is freaking out and not answering the door. The parents are off on business. Whatever businesses they do, I don't care. And the house is torn apart. By the way, the grandmother showed up at the dorm. Apparently not doing all that well, but somehow able to show up. Maybe it's her displaced spirit. Maybe it is a way to just, make things make less sense. I don't care. It doesn't matter. So, he basically is a displaced ghost that is looking for a bride. And one of them is going to have to pass on. So, this can be taken care of. So it couldn't be the great-grandmother that did that, because I guess that just didn't necessarily work. He even said, I'll be back for you and for her. And you find his true name and you have dominion over him, I guess. She goes to get her grandmother's medication, hands her a knife first, and then takes a bat into the grocery store / pharmacy, and nobody notices this. She ends up beating up a civilian with the bat. To be fair, the guy probably sucked, so that was actually necessary. And then the grandmother is going to end up dying. I mean, actually is probably going to die anyway, but she says, let her go and you can have me. And then Professor Lee, who says you've been slacking on your midterms. It doesn't seem like that much time has passed, by the way, but it's fine. There's one guy that was in this that drowned. He was electrocuted and drowned. And, it was possibly by his own doing. So to the library that is under construction, but that will not stop Sophie from dragging the corpse of this movie to the finish line. Dragging it with a meat hook that keeps breaking because it's rusted, because this movie has run out of time and run out of energy. Well before this. And he's running at him right after Ari basically arrives and helps learn the name. And says the name, but learning the name only weakens him a little bit. Not enough to where he's not immediately back in the hospital. And says, here's a rope, or here's a goddamn poison bottle that I just happen to have here. Do one of these and we can be together and your grandma will be fine. Everybody will be fine. And then the grandmother basically has the knife still and ends up taking her own life, freeing her from the curse, and there we go. They do a funeral for the grandmother, and then suddenly she realizes, oh shit, I'm pregnant. Hear the heartbeat, and that's where the thing ends. No, seriously, that is where the thing ends. That is Death Name. This movie isn't awful. This movie's just really boring. Like, really, really bland. Like, there's elements, like the idea of Korean people fighting and scratching and clawing and having to work 3, 4, 5 times as hard just to make it work here is something that some can identify with. I actually used to have South Korean owners at my work. And they fought a lot to make a good life here. And they were good people. I mean, still are, but they're not the owners of the store anymore. But the thing is that isn't enough to carry this movie very far. Before the horror elements suck. It's not scary. It's not chilling. It's just like, okay, I kind of assumed that, and it was just bland. The actors do what they can, but there's just no saving this movie. It gets an F. I'm sorry. So agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Retlin. Until we revisit the family lineage of South Koreans again. Why would we do that? Oddly specific. Happy trails to you.